Today's lesson is about what to play in between the chords. For an intro joke, I was going to pretend like I had some kind of disease in between my toes, so I googled toe disease, and... So don't do that, but you can play cool stuff like this. So it's really super simple. There's a lot of different things you can do in between chords. I think specifically when you're maybe playing some kind of like solo guitar thing, or maybe just accompanying like a voice, playing cool stuff in between really adds a total vibe to something that may otherwise become boring and repetitive. So we're going to talk about a few different things. But first of all, this classic move right here, which in and of itself sounds kind of jazzy because you've probably heard it in a lot of jazz stuff, but you can really use this anywhere, specifically just to intro a song. All right, so we're gonna do this in the key of 2020, the key of D, right? I almost said the people's key. No, key of G is people's key. Key of D is for real the key of 2020. So we're starting with the D major 7 chord. All right, so this is gonna be like our home base, our 1 chord. And even if the chord progression that you're gonna go into doesn't use this progression, I think is a cool way to start it, right? So I've got the 5th fret of the A string, the 7th fret of the D string. There's my major 7, my middle finger's on the 6th fret of the G string, and my pinky has the 7th fret of the B string, right? Rocking the D'Angelico Deluxe SS today, right? So, major 7 voicing rooted on the A string. We're gonna go from here to here. This is an E minor 7. Basically, I'm just kind of borrowing the 7th fret. Ring finger is 9 on the D string. Middle finger is 8 on the B string, right? So from here to here, A, back to D. But in between, we're gonna make some money right here, right? And it sounds more complicated than it is to play, which is exactly what we're doing. This is gonna be a diminished 7 chord, but it really fits super well with an A string rooted major 7 chord. So all you do is you have the D major 7 here, your middle finger and your pointer finger are gonna switch strings. That's it, they stay on the same fret. In fact, just kind of doing this as an exercise is incredibly recommended by doctors for brain function, right? So I've got 5, 7, 6, 7, and then when I switch this, I'm raising the root. Now I have 6, 7, 5, 7, okay? So the name of this chord would be a D sharp or E flat diminished 7, but it works so well in between that next minor chord, the E minor 7 chord, to an A7, A dominant 7, and that is the 5 chord, again, D, E, F sharp, G, A. The A7 is always gonna lead us home. Okay, even if you don't have, you know, your chord progression could be anything in D. Maybe it's just like a D to a G. Cool way to intro would be a D. And then maybe an outro. Okay, so it's always just like a cool little trick that you can do anytime you have 1 chord. It's just kind of a way to dance around and play some stuff in between. And again, totally movable if you're playing something in the key of C. Okay, so now this is something that's kind of traditional. Like I said, you'll see it a lot of jazz stuff because, again, if we talk about the numbers, right, we have a 1 chord in the key of D. This is a transition, so we're not really counting it as a chord. To the 2 chord, to the 5 chord, back to 1. So this is essentially a 2, 5, 1, which that term, that chord progression gets brought up in jazz a lot, and across different genres, just to kind of move something in a certain direction, right? But I also want to talk about just stuff that you can do in between any 2 chords. So let's take something really close, and then we'll do something a little farther apart, interval-wise, space between-wise, right? Let's take a G to an A, right? I'm just playing just bar chords here. 3rd fret on the low E string to the 5th fret on the low E string, same chord, so 3, 5, 5, 4, 3, 3, and then just move everything up 2 frets higher, right? So we have G major to A. Now maybe in between those chords, want to add something. Now this is actually something where it works really well solo-wise. If you're playing with a band, this could actually sound terrible. But we're going to assume that you don't want to play with a band because there's a lot of drama that goes along with that, and you're a peaceful person in these times. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take the same chord and just we're going to walk it to the next one. That's the simplest thing you can do, right? So G, G sharp, A. I mean, just having that in between. Okay, that's without it. Repetitive. Oh, there we go. It's something super simple, but it actually kind of adds a lot. And specifically, if you do it where you'll notice it's not sustained. What I'm doing is my fretting hand, I'm letting go of the pressure, so I strike the chord, and then I let off. I don't go off, right, but I just let go of the pressure to just make it like a beat. And then it adds almost kind of like a percussive way to lead into the next chord, okay? Now that's the easiest thing because it's really the exact same shape, and I'm just walking it. Now the main lesson here is you can actually play literally almost anything with intention in that space between, and it'll sound fine, okay? That's just an example of two major chords right next to each other that I'm just sticking another major chord in between, right? Again, G sharp, you wouldn't notate this as like G major to D sharp major to A major normally. It's just kind of thrown in there. You can make that minor. Now I'm kind of dynamically accenting that minor chord in between, right? I would say it sounds generally worse, but it doesn't totally not fit. Kind of the same vibe, but it is minor. Again, you can do anything in between that Ryders here. And as long as you play it cleanly, it's gonna seem like you knew what you were going for. So again, confidence and intention is such a huge part of guitar playing. Specifically, like I said, let me reiterate, solo-wise. Now, if you're playing this and maybe the bass player, if you're on this weird G13 or something as a transition, and the bass player is doing something else, it's like what's happening here? But again, for a solo thing, it's just kind of something to keep it interesting. It doesn't even have to be in between. You could jump anywhere. So G. I'm not doing anything except just like playing a chord. These are just minor 7 chords. Literally anywhere else. Right? And it almost seems, again, some work better than others for sure, but it almost seems like you're doing it with intention, right? Now, if we take a little farther away, let's take a G to a C, right? So now we're on like the 3rd fret going all the way to the 8th fret, same thing. Now, I think a great thing to do is to be able to know what notes lie between these two chords in a scale, right? If we're thinking, whatever we're thinking, key of G to C, right? A 1 to a 4 chord, G, A, B, C. I think one of the most common things to do is to just transition between those two chords using the notes in the key. So G to a C, G, right? So that right there, I was just playing the octave and not worrying about the actual chords. When I say octave, right? I got this major chord, I'm going to go to the A, and I'm just going to play the 5th fret of the E string and the 7th fret of the D string. Now I'm playing a finger style, so it's kind of easier just to single those octaves out. But even if you have a pick, you can do the same thing just by kind of muting the strings that you're not playing with your fretting hand. So G. So it's almost kind of like you're acting as your own bass player in a solo arrangement accompaniment type thing. You could go the next step and play the chords that are in that scale. In the key of G's case, it'd be A minor, B minor, C. You can play them as bar chords like this. A, B, C, G. Minor 7. But you'll notice the octaves kind of have a different vibe to it, and that's something that I actually like to play a lot. A cool thing about octaves is instead of transitioning just with the notes between, you can actually go one further in the scale and back. So the next note in the key of G, G, A, B, C, D. D would be the next note, which would be the 10th fret on the low E string. So if we go back, we're going to skip C and come back to it. So G, G, A, B, D, C, D, back. Right? Kind of going for, we can skip all the ones in between and just go from a G, D, C, F, G, F sharp, E, F sharp, G. So again, I really think that it's important to know the notes that are in the key and then what chords those become. And again, don't worry about learning what chords each one is and trying to have to hit those. Like, don't be like, all right, so if I'm doing that past the chord thing from a C, I want to get the E to the F sharp to the G. Don't worry so much about E minor, F sharp, minor 7 flat 5 G, because that's kind of tricky, like a C. That's kind of quick, something like that, right? Just get those octaves, because those octaves are always going to work, and it sounds cool, and then go G, D, E, C, D. A cool thing that you'll hear a lot of times with a bass player or a song is repeating the same interval between. And again, we're just going from a G to a C. G, D, E, C, D, G, D, C, D, G. And then again, remember, we're on G, so okay, so just some kind of tips as you can go in between chords. Also, the masterclass that I made about just kind of exploring the fretboard is going to be on sale, so I'm going to link you to that because the coupon is only good for like 5 days, and it goes more in depth into kind of cool tips and tricks like this. So check that out. Hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, or the website if you have any questions, and keep your toes clean. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks a lot.